think we're, oh, here we go. We are now live streamed, so yay. So I want to welcome everyone to the first FloodStat meeting of 2023. It's great to see some faces here in the room. And we have more folks online with us too. And for the folks online, if you have any questions, the Q&A function is live, so please use that if you have any questions as we roll through this, and we will do our best to get your questions answered. Just want to take a second and recognize Councilmember Parker, who is with us today. So the mayor should be rolling in as well, so very excited to have you with us again. And I hope you keep coming back to these FloodStat meetings and come to Housing Stat next month too. So I think everybody knows this, but just to make sure we're setting the table for everyone, FloodStat is kind of under this bigger umbrella of what we call priority stat. And basically, this really allows us to work together to make sure that we are all kind of making progress on the mayor's highest priorities, which should be the city's highest priorities. So it allows us this opportunity to collaborate and work together and also demonstrate that we are making progress on these things. So getting into the nitty-gritty of FloodStat. So we have some key performance indicators or KPIs that are kind of the overarching goals, if you will, of the FloodStat program. So the first one is easy, right? No preventable loss of life or injuries during a flood event. That is job one. Also, how do we reduce flood damage to private property? Reduce the economic impact of sea level rise and flooding events. Reduce the flood risk to the city, so taking care of our own facilities and things like that to make sure that our resources and those that the citizens pay for are as protected as possible. And then, of course, reduce the flood risk to the city through the community. So how do we give citizens the tools and the knowledge and the skills to be able to protect them from level rise or kind of these flooding events that we tend to get in trouble. So we know this isn't going away. Thanks to our GIS team, we can look at tidal trends in our area anytime. This looks at Charleston Harbor. There's a lot of data that comes into there, and they do a great job of putting this together in a dashboard format for us. I think we all remember in kind of 2015, 2016, it's really kind of like we had all these events happen and kind of ignited a fire, I think, if you will, for us to be doing a lot towards flooding and sea level rise. I feel like and you can see it there on that top left chart, we kind of had a little bit of a lull. You can kind of see that we're picking back up, if you will, in trends on the number of times we get over 7-foot tide in the city. Good morning, Mayor.
Morning.
So this isn't going away, and so we still have a lot of work to do, but FloodStat does provide us the opportunity to also celebrate the work and the milestones that we are all reaching together. So I'm going to take a minute for kind of to plug a new program that has been made available this year, thanks to City Council and the Mayor for including this as part of the budget. We got a little bit of money to kind of come up with this innovation challenge in the city, but basically this provides an opportunity micro grants for staff to apply for these micro grants for implementing or testing ideas that they have, so we can improve how we deliver services in the organization to our citizens. So this is open to all city staff. However, you need to have someone that's either a Bridge Academy graduate or someone who is on the Bloomer Innovation team. If you you have an idea that you want to apply for money for and don't know of somebody that is a graduate or on the innovation team, reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to find you someone that could potentially sponsor implementing Crazy Up. The first application deadline is March 17th. If we don't use all the funding, we will open up another opportunity for folks to make applications with these mechanisms. So really exciting new program. So it's a little bit of a selfless plug there for that while I have y'all. So today we had to cut Katie off last week. I think we ran a little bit long with I can't remember who was presenting. So I wanted to give Katie the opportunity to number one finish sharing all the amazing work that she's doing, and then today we also have Ben, our new emergency manager, who has been willing to jump into the fire here and into FloodStat with us and talk about some of the work that he's planning and doing in emergency management. So, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Katie.
This is the fun place to stand. All right, well, hi everyone, and I think we have a good group online too. Thanks for being here. So as Tracy mentioned, I have 5 different key performance indicators in FloodStat, and I presented on 4 of them in the fall. And it's on YouTube if you'd like to go back and check it out. But today I will specifically be focusing on the one that we didn't get to in the fall, which is our city buildings. So the KPI is to reduce our city government operations 100% by 2050 and 56% by 2030. So we have some numbers to share with you today. I will share that our emissions figures, we are getting ready to do another greenhouse gas inventory, and that will show the actual reductions in numbers that are reported in the FloodStat dashboard. So we'll do that this year for the year 2022, and then we'll be able to compare 2022 to our last numbers of 2018 to see a difference in there. We talked about our buildings and facilities. We talked a lot about proactive maintenance of existing city facilities and making sure that we have appropriate budget funding in there so we can take care of what we have. It's especially useful because once you have problems with a facility, then it costs a lot more money to fix it than to just do some preventative maintenance. So I believe City Council and Mayor Tecklenburg have made a priority to allocate more funding for maintenance for buildings, so that's great. I know that there is a new facilities analyst position that was approved in the budget a bit ago, and that I believe is in the process of being hired. That will be the next step to sort of get a handle on our existing facilities and then move forward with creating that facilities management plan that's really important so we can have an inventory and plan for all of our facilities. Because as you know, we have hundreds of facilities and many are small and spread out all throughout the city, so it will be important to have that plan. We are also talking about our new capital projects. These are our best opportunities to plan for renewable energy, and our capital projects team is excited to be pursuing renewable energy on a few upcoming capital projects. So that's really exciting to hear. Hopefully this can be, I believe the plan is for this to become a permanent item for new city construction, and we're also considering EV ready requirements for electric vehicle infrastructure in all of our new construction. So those are great things, and appreciate Edmund and Jason's attention to that. Let's see, so we are also looking for renewable energy opportunities on our existing facilities. So existing facilities are a lot more of a challenge. We've done some feasibility assessments in the past that haven't proved successful, but that doesn't mean that there aren't opportunities out there to go back and retrofit. Our existing facilities have a lot of challenges, so a lot of them are located downtown, a lot of them have really small roofs, a lot of them have older roofs, which is one of the bigger challenges. It's not a great practice to add new solar to an old roof. You want to update that roof first. And then of course we have a lot of large trees over a lot of our roofs that shade them. So not every facility is going to be ideal for solar and retrofitting them, but there are some great incentives in the new Inflation Reduction Act that came out that will provide us direct payment discounts for installing renewable energy systems. So I'll talk more about those in a moment, but basically it would include anything that would be on our existing city facilities, renewable energy on those, and also for new construction. So it's the renewable energy investment tax credit. And in the past, this has been just a tax credit, which has been hard for local governments to take advantage of. Oh, it has changed. So for nonprofits and local governments, it is actually a direct payment allocation. So and we can all and the amount has changed. So in the past, it has been 30% and kind of dropped down. So last year, I believe it was 26% the federal tax credit for renewable energy. Now it's up to 70%. So we went from 30% or 26% up to 70 this year. So that's pretty exciting. And like I said, that 70 can now be given back to us in the form of a check instead of a tax credit. So this is major news that we can all start planning for. Now of that 70, I know Gianna's on the call, of that 70%, there's some increments for how you earn the 70. So the 30%, the first 30 is a base allocation. So basically any solar system would qualify for the 30, and then there's a few different steps you can earn. So if you were to install the systems in, say, energy poverty or low-income communities, you can earn an extra 20%. So there's a few different steps. One of those steps is affordable housing. So up to 20% for renewable energy on affordable housing projects. So that's huge. So something that we just need to consider and think about more, and I'm happy to talk with folks more about how we could potentially take advantage of these. This is not a grant, this is just a direct payment credit for what we install. So there is a scale that it reduces over about 10 years. I can send that information out to folks so you have that numbers, but for the next couple of years it will stay at 70%. So that's pretty exciting news.
Hey, I have a question.
Yeah.
So I know this is like relatively new, so but I wonder, so that the analyst position could really help. I know, well, I guess historically it's so much more expensive to implement these things on existing infrastructure. So it's always kind of been we tackle these things with new buildings and things like that. So, but with this new money that's available, or these, I imagine that analyst could help us better determine, okay, that does it make sense to try to retrofit some of these things now that all these incentives are there? And do we have a sense of does that change the game for us as far as looking at doing some retrofits? Maybe that, I don't know.
Are you talking about the facility?
Yeah, facilities, yeah.
So I know Jason has a list a mile long for what that person would work on, and I am not sure that renewable energy would even be part of that scope. That's really maintaining existing facilities. So we are in the process of chatting more with Amy, Matt, and powers that be to determine how do we appropriately plan for renewable energy, what capacity needs to we have. Dale and I have talked about hiring potentially an energy analyst, but before we were to put that in the budget, we want to make sure that that's the right position that we need. So we're having those discussions now about how we plan for that. I would imagine, just based off our energy usage, there is no way if we retrofitted every existing facility with renewable energy, it would not cover our energy demand, especially mostly because of the density of our buildings, not every roof is appropriate, things like that. So I would imagine we need to have some type of a plan that would include some of our existing facilities, retrofitting some, making sure it's all on new construction, and we're designing those roofs so they can take most advantage of solar, but retrofitting some structures too, and then having some off-site renewable energy sources. I believe in the new Energy Freedom Act, we are allowed to work with third party for utility scale contracting. I don't think we're allowed to do that in our franchise agreement. So those are all discussions that we need to continue having to figure out the best path forward. There are some restrictions at the state level that make it difficult. So,
Katie,
yes.
if I may interject, Gianna knows who all the partners are. As you know, we have a lot of partners that do affordable housing, and some are under construction right now. Amenities is redoing Archer School, and James Lewis Apartments is under construction right now. Quite a few planned to come out of the ground in the next year. Then the ongoing I'm just thinking we need to jump right out and communicate this information to some of our partners. And they might even be able to add something to something that's under construction now. Take advantage of that extra credit.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
So I could pull together, just a couple slides, and maybe we could forward that out to folks. I'll get with Gianna about that.
That'd be
Great
great.
idea. I think a lot of it's learned because it's all new. It was all just announced recently, so.
That's great.
Mr. Mayor, you were reading my mind. And so, especially for James Lewis and revenue and WB incubator will be, so that's something that needs to come back to community development. So I was curious if the construction contracts are already in the deal or not. That's where this.
They are, I mean,
Okay.
but some of these things could be added, I don't know if we're checking with the bills.
That's
But
not
certainly,
bad.
we think about, the UG Street project that, Navy Place is gonna build, they haven't broken ground yet, so clearly those that are kind of in the queue that haven't broken ground yet, they could easily add some, infrastructure, energy. So anyway.
Great, that sounds great. And then, that the discussion's still happening internally, because how do we take advantage of that credit? It's typically, budget gets really involved in the capital projects, so, talking to budget folks too, do we have budget folks on that? I'll reach
I don't
out
think
to
so.
them separately. Okay, so that, tax credit's really exciting. Then we also have some energy efficiency conservation block grant funding coming to us. So the city was allocated $195,000 through that program. It's a formula program, so it's not technically a competitive grant, but we do still need to apply for it. Luckily, they've created a voucher program to make it easier for smaller local governments to apply with a lot less reporting requirements. So our plan is to take that funding and use it towards creating a fleet transition plan. We would hire contracts to do that, and that would set us up for success to transition our whole fleet. And then we could take that transition plan and go after a large federal funding opportunity to implement that plan and pay for a whole bunch of vehicles. And the hope there is that we could actually catch up on our vehicle replacement plan, so maybe we could replace the vehicles that really need to be replaced every year. As we know, we are behind on that just due to funding constraints. So that is a really neat opportunity the fleet is really excited about. They have also identified two new electric vehicles we're hoping to pilot this year, and we're looking especially for our mail courier to test that out. Great test, driving a lot, and potentially in the BNS department where I sit. So I would help those departments with the education on how we transition those vehicles. At the same time, we're also looking at charging infrastructure. So thank you to Mayor Tecklenburg and City Council for approving a lot of the items that were requested to move the climate action plan forward. So that included upgrading our existing 8 electric vehicle charging stations in our garages to become dual port stations. So we would have 16 ports, and they would become networked. So that means now once they're networked, we can actually reserve these stations for fleet vehicles. So we could say, hey, these 2 stations will be reserved every night just for fleet. No one else can charge here. It just wouldn't work for them. So that's exciting news too, and will get us moving forward. That funding also included funding for the tech center garage. So we'll hopefully get to electrify the tech center garage too. So we are trying to push that bid forward fast, so we can make sure we have that ready for when we get our new vehicles. Let's see, the Energy Efficiency Conservation Block Grant also has some requirements for creating an energy efficiency and conservation plan. So those are all things that our division will be working on so we can qualify for that funding. All right, so then, we're also working on an electric vehicle parking policy. So once we have these network stations, we're going to limit when people can charge here. So we're going to get a lot more turnover, so people can't just sit in the electric vehicle spot for 2 days. We need to have a policy for that and signage. So we're working on that too. Let's see. Okay, and then So the next item to chat about would be our employee commute. So our HR department has implemented a permanent telework policy that allows for 2 remote days. So we've calculated that last year that the data on that is over 7,000 remote staff work days in 2022. The outside equivalent from the employee commute side. So that really helps lower emissions. If there's a possibility to increase that, with flexibility based on job positions, that could certainly lower emissions even more for our employee commute, which is a decent chunk of our city emissions. Are there any discussions of that happening or? All right. So,
There is discretion on the part of the department heads, so.
here, okay.
That's included in the policy.
All right, well, sounds good. Our leaf blowers are part of our fleet technically, so we did also receive funding in the budget this year to fully transition the gas-powered leaf blowers to electric. I imagine we will keep a couple just for post-storm events, just in case, to help us be more resilient, because we never know what type of fuel will be available after a storm. But I know Parks Department, Recreation, and Stormwater are working diligently to replace those pieces of equipment this year, and that's in line with our city resolution to have those replaced, ideally by this summer. It may take longer because the supply chain has been difficult with anything electric right now.
When we do like an analysis of like our CO2 emissions from the city, I mean, I imagine those come into play. Those are pretty terrible. So when are we due to have an update to our emissions?
We are going to update them this year.
Okay.
So,
okay.
But we do have data on the leaf blower. So far, 25% of our fleet has already been converted, and that eliminated 80 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent just in 2022. So once we converted all that figure will go up. Also, some wins for another win for our building was, and this was a bit ago, but our Board of Architectural Review passed the policy statement about renewable energy in historic districts. So they're encouraging renewable energy and solar on historic properties now, which is great to see. I think there's probably still some tweaks that we'll work through over the coming years, but it's a good first step and gives clients, an understanding of what the BAR is looking for, so it can streamline the process better. And finally, streetlights. So streetlights, we did pass a contract last fall with Dominion to transition the majority of our streetlights to LED lights. So I believe that transition is just getting started. Did you have any comments on that?
And you're right, they're just getting started. I'm told they're gonna start West Ashley, out of West Ashley, gonna work their way in, and getting up. And then come lastly to the peninsula, up the peninsula, and work their way down. This is just for the Cobra style light, not for our gaslight looking fixtures downtown.
Great, okay, thank you for that. Okay, and then just one item, so our trees in public places. So we actually had a decent planting year where there were over 1,300 trees planted on public property. So that includes anything the Parks Department would plant in parks or in city right of way. That also includes any development projects that would plant trees on the right of way. So I think that's where a majority of the trees are coming from. That also would include any new city construction. So we had I believe a new park last year, for example, that had new trees planted. So that number, it's always important when we're planting trees that we make sure we have the funding to maintain these. And I know the street tree inventory was funded in the budget, so that's really exciting. The RFP for that is being drafted right now, so hopefully that can get out soon, and that will be a process. I don't know if it will be done by end of the year. It's pretty big, and endeavor, so we'll see. But that is pretty exciting. And then we are working on a partnership with the Charleston Parks Conservancy to help with the tree progress, so that they are very interested in supporting more tree plantings and care. So we appreciate the partnership and collaborating with them. Matt, are there any questions?
Can I ask you how you're tracking that 1,300? And Parks Conservancy, we get information from private citizens, we post the track the number of trees planted this year.
So that number is tracked, and the caps are through the Parks Department. I know Rodney tracks those, so he'll see it like TRC. He'll go through any new construction that would have, streets in it and right of ways for the large development projects. So he can physically count those, and then Clark tracks all the trees that are planted that the Parks Department plants themselves in parks and in through his street tree program. So the parks gathers all that data.
So I'm just thinking it might be nice to have an annual goal and keep a little dashboard on the trees. Kind of ties into that heat resiliency study that no one in the city worked on together, and keep ever more articles about the benefits of water. Plant them under the power lines, but everywhere else that we can.
We move the power lines underground first, and then we can plant some trees.
Next year.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of my items, our climate action plan has a few very specific targets, but there's so many different projects and programs happening that I would love to, and I've talked with Tracy and Shannon about this, create some metrics for each individual program so we can report out on those. And trees is a great example. I believe we did put a goal in our climate action plan of 1,500 trees a year, if I'm remembering correctly. So that would be a little shy of that.
Right.
But yeah, I'm a big fan of creating goals for each of these. There are just so many, so we just need to sit down and crunch them out.
This new tree zone, city space for public property, or in private development, developers would be.
Right, so it would be on public property, is how we say it, because private developers can put them in on the right of way, and we'll count those. But we would not count trees that were on private property. So yes, so we do urge citizens to plant trees on private property, and the Parks and Service is going to help more with that too. And we do track private tree planting in the Charleston Rain Proof program. So that's another avenue for data. So there's so many pieces to pull together here. Suggestions or comments?
Thank you, Katie.
Well, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Katie.
Thank you.
Well done. Okay, so we'll switch gears a little bit now, and like I said, Ben's been here a minute, but definitely his first presentation via FloodStat. So we've been trying to bring him up to speed on what this FloodStat thing is, and kind of what our ultimate goals are. So Ben, I'll turn it over to you. I can drive for you, or I can turn this around for you. Either way.
You got it. Don't worry about it. Thank you. Morning, everybody. As Tracy said, I'm the city's new emergency management director. I've been here since August. So in that short time, I've already had a hurricane come through and a tropical storm scare. So plenty going on.
Welcome.
We're glad you're here. So Tracy reached out to me about FloodStat. It's kind of a little bit about, okay, well, how do we get emergency management involved? Obviously, we're involved in the overall flood plan. Because emergency management is more of a coordinating and support agency, we don't have a lot of world numbers that are applicable. You can't say, well, there's fewer floods. I can't control that. There's nothing I can really do to have a true impact on that. So we had to take sort of a step back. What is it that we support that we can show? So the first thing that we came up with, our recovery effort efforts with FEMA. Anybody who's familiar with working with FEMA knows that it is a arduous task. It is long, drawn out, and they are the best in the world at telling you why you don't deserve money. Which is a shame because they have millions and millions of dollars that is supposed to be dedicated to getting us back on our feet after the disaster. So we need to take a look at how we're doing recovery, and we need to say, what are our goals when we're coming out of recovery? We have a very general idea. Within emergency management, we say getting back to normalcy. Now for the public, that means kids are back in school. You're able to go back to work. So we're getting the things you need. That's normal. You can go to a park. Government is different. Is everybody back to doing their day-to-day job without having to worry about that last disaster that we just got through? It is a long task. If you've got anybody from RC, they can tell you they're probably still working on things years later. And that's standard. That's just the way it is. So we want to take a look, how do we maximize this? So our metrics, first off, we're going to look at efficiency. That's the timeliness and our cost of coverage within. How quickly are we able to get people back to their day-to-day jobs, transition out of disaster mode and back into day-to-day? And combine that with our cost of coverage. How much of the eligible funds, how much of what that disaster cost us, are we able to get back in recovery from it? The effectiveness, that's more along the lines of the cost of recovery. We really want to look for about 90% of our eligible costs. That is definitely on the high end. As I said, FEMA is the best in the world at telling you no, you don't need to get this money back. I have seen jurisdictions lose out millions recovery funding because their policies and programs were not what FEMA said they were supposed to be. Or they didn't have a way of proving to FEMA that this is what happened. What I mean by that is, say you have a culvert that's been washed out by floodwaters. You come in and you say, well, FEMA, this is what happened. FEMA says, okay, show me the before photos that prove that was not the condition of that culvert. Most places don't have that because you weren't thinking about that at the time you were doing the job. You didn't think that you had to prove something with FEMA after the fact. Or you say, well, we pay our employees hazardous duty fee when they have to come in and work during the storm. FEMA says, okay, where does it say that in your pay policy? Now, right here, the mayor may invoke this policy. FEMA says, well, no. It says the mayor may. It doesn't say he has to. So that's discretionary, so that doesn't count. All that money we just paid our employees for protecting the public, nope, that's no longer reimbursed. FEMA will throw that out right away, along with just a host of other things. So now, the cost of repairs, the cost of getting through that disaster, that's now just a taxpayer burden. So we've got to make sure that our programs and policies fit exactly what FEMA is doing. We have to be better at FEMA than FEMA is. So we set these goals, and how do we get there? Well, we've already started the process. The first step, we actually began this week. We held a recovery tabletop exercise where we brought in all of our internal departments who are responsible for the recovery process. And we started going through things. And it was more than just tell me how you do this. It was show me where it says. Tell me where it says that you do this. Because that's what FEMA is going to look for. We have to make sure that everything we do is documented ahead of time. And that benefits us in the second way, in that we're not reliant on institutional knowledge. It's not because, well, Ben knows what to do. No, it's because the emergency management director knows what to do by the title of his position. That person is responsible for this. Here's where it says it in the emergency operations plan. Here's where it says it in the job description. Here's where it says it in the continuity of operations. It is documented that this is why this person does this. That way, FEMA can never dispute. We have it in writing, it's signed off. Other efforts that we're going to do is we're already working with South Carolina EMD. We're reviewing all of our policies. We're starting right now with the emergency pay policy, making sure that not only is it FEMA compliant, but are we actually able to maximize what our reimbursement is? Are we going through every single avenue of being able to get money back from FEMA for the time that our personnel are working? We'll look at our building inspections. We do pre-disaster inspections to make sure things are good to go ahead of time. Let's make sure we're documenting all of that. We need to provide it back to FEMA so that if there are damages, we can show them. Here's the before, here's the after. It is very clear what happened. The activity that's going to come out of that, this is where emergency management is. It's a cycle, it's a circle. We go from recovery into mitigation. Every time you have a disaster, you're going to come out of that with at least 3 or 4 identified mitigation projects. Things that somebody's going to say, well, you know what, if we had done this before the disaster struck, it wouldn't have been as bad. That's now a project. And there is millions of dollars in FEMA and other agency funding out there specifically for mitigation funding. I can tell you, all of my experience, what I have found is that there are only a few jurisdictions across the country. Charleston does a decent job. We can do better. We can do much better. Greenville does an outstanding job. There are places, a lot of your larger jurisdictions, LA, New York, they do a great job of applying for it. There is definitely a standard that we can meet. And our stakeholders, it's really just going to be everybody falling within different spectrums. And that ties into our second performance standard here, and that is training. If you have an emergency management department that is not heavily involved in your jurisdiction's training, just replace that entire department because they're not doing what you need them to do. So what we're going to look at is we're building out a true training program for the city, something that can be built upon year over year, addresses an all hazards approach to emergency management. It includes all of our key partners, not just our internal departments, but our area stakeholders, counties, private sector, state, feds. We want to make sure everybody's involved so that we all understand what the responsibilities are during a disaster. So right now, what our target on this is, we're looking to do 4 exercises per year. As I said, we just held our first one this past week. We did a recovery tabletop exercise. What a tabletop exercise is, it's a discussion-based exercise where we come in with our policies and our procedures, sit down and we say, okay, something happens, what do we do? Why do we do it? So we just work through the process. Nobody has to physically perform tasks, you just have to be able to answer the questions. It's like your work. Say, this is where it says this is what we do. Next, we're going to go into an activation drill. Charles Ash, our new emergency management specialist, has already drawn that up for us. Every year, we want to make sure that we can activate the Municipal Emergency Operations Center whenever we need to for any kind of event, whether we know a hurricane is coming or suddenly get a tornado warning. It shouldn't matter. We should be able to fire up the MEOC at the drop of a hat. Next, we're going to work on bringing in a seminar and a workshop. This is where we actually reach out to subject matter experts all across the country, across the world. We bring them in and talk about their experiences, their knowledge, to pass that along to us. So it could be anything from dealing with earthquakes to terrorist events, anything in between, anything that presents a hazard to the city. We bring in experts and they talk to us about the best practices that they have come across all around the world. Excellent opportunity to really change the way we think, because that's how we get out of the rut of what we've always done it this way. hear what everybody else is doing, and you say, okay. Our fourth exercise would be the full-scale exercise. And this is where we actually go through the motions of an actual event. We say, okay, this year we're going to plan for a hurricane, and we are going to take a whole week, step by step. What are we doing throughout the entire process? We test everything. We make sure that our field capabilities are up to speed. We make sure that the MEOC is running smooth. Check to make sure that if our primary personnel aren't available for something, that there's a secondary person who can step into that role and backfill and make sure that things keep moving. In addition to those exercises, we're going to bring in training classes. We're going to start off small, trying for about 4 classes a year. Primary one we want to bring in every year is essentially the foundation of emergency management. That's the ICS 300-400 class from FEMA. That's where you really learn how an emergency operations center is supposed to work, how the fundamentals of emergency management are all supposed to come together. We're going to try and bring in a recovery course every year, a planning course, and then also just a general knowledge course. There are all sorts of training agencies all across the country that they can bring in information on hazardous materials, dealing with electrical facilities, wastewater facilities, large animal events, sporting events, anything you can think of. There is a training course out there for somebody, and we can bring those in. We work closely with the counties and with the state to make sure that those courses can be brought in and that we have instructors available. So our efficiency on this, we're going to be measuring that by the number of exercises we have per year. It's understood that things happen, and we may not be able to have that full-scale exercise in its entirety every year, or maybe something happens and we have to postpone a seminar or something like that. We know that's going to happen. But year over year, we should be able to show that we're having 3 or 4 training exercises every year, showing that that program is moving along. Also going to check our year-over-year improvement for our effectiveness. The after-action reports that we do these training exercises, we're going to document. Here's what we had this time around. Do the same exercise next year. We'll take a look. Okay, well, we fixed these 4 problems right here, but these 2 are still an issue for us. So we make sure that year over year that we're continuing to improve through that process. Our productivity, it's going to be about the number of personnel that we're getting trained. And that's really where we're going to need buy-in from the rest of the city. And yes, I am sending my personnel to these training exercises. I'm sending them to these classes. We're going to take advantage of training that's being made available because that makes the entirety of the jurisdiction stronger. So we're very happy with the buy-in that we've gotten. Our recovery tabletop was very well attended. So we're very happy with that, and we're hoping that that continues. Speaking with police department and fire department, it sounds like they want to have people in these classes as much as possible. So we're looking forward to this. We think it's going to be a very effective program as long as we stay on top. The goals and metrics is really just a restatement of what I just went over. The number of personnel that we're training, the number of exercises that we're having, again, percentage of FEMA expenses that we're recouping, and the time frame and efficiency of our FEMA process, making sure that we're maximizing our efforts there. So with that, are there any questions?
Tony, in your experience, I know it takes a long time to get reimbursed from FEMA. You qualify and be approved, but it takes a long time. Is there a metric you're trying to get? I mean, it could be 9 months, 18 months, a year, and so that puts a strain on sort of cash flow within the budget office, and then you have to worry about it. So, is there a goal we could set for that, or?
There are categories that measures, that's your personnel, your equipment, your supplies, that are a time frame there within a year. Providing us with a recommended timeline. For some projects that works, for others it doesn't work as well. And then they have a time extension process. The goal should be that we never reach a time extension. We never have to request that extension. We get everything done within that initial scope. And that should, in theory, help out our budget office.
Closeouts from the FEMA closeouts from 2017 or 2016 are still hanging around. So, yeah.
And the state didn't even close out Hurricane Hugo until just several years ago. Go on and on. I've seen 2015 floods projects for one jurisdiction. They were still under time extension requests without any work having been done 4 or 5 years after the fact. So matter of staying on top of it, and that's part of why we need to make sure that everybody understands the responsibilities so we can keep all that managed.
We're an assessment at some point, I'll go for example, and we're still, trying to recover some funds from FEMA. Do you get to the point where you're putting more time into trying to get those funds back and it's even worth spending on it, and just, decide to take the write-off and move on?
You can reach that point, but if you have, it's because there have been a lot of failures with that. Most of these projects, there's some kind of a cost threshold. To reach a point where it's no longer financially viable to try to continue working with you, you really drop the balls.
So, I presume that damage assessment is a big part of our training, or I think it should be if not.
Yes, sir. Damage assessment for the counties, that's actually an annual requirement for them for their grant purposes through SCEMD. We are tying on to that with Charleston County and with Berkeley County. Plan is we're going to send our folks to Charleston County training. Anybody who can't make it to that, we'll get them into the Berkeley County training because it'll be the same course.
Thank you.
Then I just have to say, I'm good or bad, I've been here long enough to see the evolution of the emergency management here, and it's really exciting to hear this commitment to these things. To recoup, money for all of our citizens, and just continuously working to build the depth of emergency management the way that we respond. So it's very exciting. So awesome.
I'll second that. It's just amazing what Ben has been able to accomplish and set forth for us in the last 6 months.
There you go. Keep it up for the next 6 months.
For Ben. Thank you.
All right.
All right. Well, on the folks attending live, any last remarks from anybody? Thank you so much, and we will have another edition of FloodStat in April, right? And then you can also attend Housing Stat next month in March. So look forward to seeing y'all then. Thank you.
Thank you.